evening.
Hi there.
Hello, John. Hello, Bob.
How you doing, Scott? Read through Bob's and I've read through Joe's. Hey, Joe.
Evening.
Hi,
Hello,
Joe.
And I've been rethinking whether or not we should propose to just scrap the bulk of the section on the town administrator because it's nothing. It's a little more than a job description. But I was going through it. There are, in fact, a lot of parts of it which might not be considered a job description. I just don't know. For example, the being appointed the budget officer and the financial officer and chief procurement officer. I don't know if that would normally be what you would expect to be part of the job description of the town manager or the town administrator, or whether they're really something extra. So it could be, when I was thinking about what kinds of things might be brought forward from that last section into just the basic, until just the basic discussion and leave everything out of the law. So I wouldn't be surprised if it wouldn't be a good idea to keep a lot of those things in. So what I started thinking is whether we can mostly just leave all the sections that are there, but work on the wording of them so that it doesn't have the effect that there is now of basically transforming the town into nothing more than a very strong town administrator and a select board that is by bylaw giving away all of their duties. And as I was reading through that, the thing that strikes me the most is that there are a number of places where town administrator is given the authority to appoint department heads that report to him and so on. Well, that includes the police chief and the fire chief. And so it makes me think that if we're going to make adjustments, we have to somehow or another make sure that we leave out police chief and fire chief and town accountant and certainly the auditor. And then
John, excuse me for a minute. We don't have an auditor.
That's an outside service, right?
It's an outside service, right?
Yeah,
Hire an auditor.
but cities do have auditors.
Yes.
Okay, so when you're using the term auditor, somebody may get you hung up on the fact, well, we don't have one. And that's correct, we don't.
But
So
we have
it's the audit function from the independent auditor that's the issue.
yes. Can we reflect that in some language? By maybe just saying independent, hire an independent auditor? The reason I'm concerned a little bit is that I noticed I read a bunch of statutes last night, and when they talk about towns as opposed to cities, they say specifically that the towns are allowed to let their town accountant serve as their town auditor. And that, of course, is if the town accountant is in fact the town administrator, then that's the recipe for mayhem. So however it is that we choose to call this person and describe what happens, I think it's important that it be done specifically and that it stop the accountant and the auditor being the same person.
Well, I don't know for a fact whether or not a town can have an auditor. You say you saw something where they did, but you have to be careful. The example, I think I put it in the covering part of my email. The town of South Hadley had a special act of the legislature to set up their method of town administration and board of selectmen. So whatever they have is not necessarily what we're entitled to have under our present approvals. And it
Yes.
could be that somebody who has had a special act of the legislature does have their own internal auditor.
Right, as opposed to an annual year-end outside third-party auditor.
That's correct, yes. And don't ask me how the duties of the auditor, I suppose if you get big enough, you want to audit to make sure that
Yeah,
somebody all over the place
you got 10
isn't trying to
accountants, then
be
one guy's
dishonest.
job is just to make sure the other guys are doing their job right.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay,
Or not sticking it off the top or whatever.
So John, if we just, to try to, instead of going at it with 52 amendments, if we just said, we would like to change this so that he is not responsible to hire those 3 people. As a simplification of trying to get to where we're trying to get to.
I thought my way was even more simple.
yes,
Which
it
is,
was.
But then some of the language,
You just don't mention it and they get hired because they've been getting hired for gosh knows how many years now.
Oh.
And so the authority would stay the same. You haven't changed it.
I agree, except that the way the bylaws are worded in a couple other places, you don't need, if you say nothing, then there are a couple places in the bylaws where it says that the town administrator has the authority basically to appoint all the people who report to him. And the fire department and the police department report to the town auditor, to the town administrator.
Right.
By being completely silent on it, we have to change all that language somehow, or else we have to specifically put it into another place. I was surprised places that it shows up, but it shows up in more than one place, even with our rewrites here.
Well, you put in some wording about he has the Board of Selectmen can delegate the authority to hire the police chief and the fire chief.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
That should come out no matter what, because we don't want that occurring. We don't want to even suggest it.
Well,
If
I think recommends a good word,
yeah, I thought that,
but the approval needs to stay with the select board. The final approval.
Well, that
Yeah,
is in the language of section 6. Here it is, number 8 that we were toiling with. The town administrator shall inform the select board in writing of all such appointments. Such appointments shall be effective 15 calendar days after receipt of such written notification, unless the select board votes by at least a 2/3 majority vote to disapprove specifically designated appointment or appointments.
But that's not doing it. That's delegating it and maybe or maybe not disapproving it.
Right, but the way that you worded your statement, it sounded pretty much, the same way. What I'm saying is currently there's that language. So when I, so when I think strategically about it, let me just quickly back up I want to make one observation. It was my impression that normally the town administrator would appoint the independent auditor, and normally you would have an independent accountant. And that wouldn't necessarily be an issue because your accountant would be different and then your administrator would be different. But because we have all three, that complicates the matter now, except that we've all sort of have verbalized that in fact, you know, we don't see any problem currently in the way that we're doing it, not that we should do it forever. So one point before I jump back to some word modification here is that if Chris is going to be retiring, I mean, he's what, 65 now, 66? I don't know. So he must be approaching retirement age. I guess from town bylaws, there's nothing mandatory, but since when you get to retirement age, we should be pushing the idea that right now, regardless of the cost, we should be hiring a separate town accountant, because that person would be the bridge when Chris, who contains all the information on everything, okay, goes away, you know, when he retires. So that would be one long-term strategy. So my point about the independent auditor is that if we had a separate town accountant, I don't have a problem with the town administrator appointing an independent auditor, because that seems to me to be like a logical function. So anyway.
I think that hiring the accountant is a logical function for the town administrator.
He works for him,
He works for him.
right?
Goes on all the time. You hire the people that work for you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that says that it's bad.
No, I'm not even saying that. What I'm talking about is that right now, our town administrator holds that position.
That's
I
a
don't
different
really-
issue.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with him hiring somebody else. I guess that would be logical. You know, I'm just saying that in thinking through everything we've discussed, to me, it's really time to push to have a separate person be the town accountant and like do it in the next year, you know, because I'm sure Chris is approaching retirement age, but also it gets us, because it seems that the select board is willing to vest more authority in this one individual. Our balance is really more the independence of the town accountant then, as a check, you know, so you've got now two sources of information to compare. So anyway.
First of all, I think Chris is probably planning on working until he's 70, so 5 more years. Second thing that I also agree with Bob that the accountant actually works for the town administrator, and it's whether you hire somebody on a consulting basis or basically an independent accountant working for the town, or whether the accountant is a town employee or part-time town employee. They really have to report. They really have to report to the town administrator. They work for the town administrator, and so I have not a problem with the idea of the town administrator appointing the town accountant, and the only reason why the current situation exists is, as I said, it was recognized years and years ago. And I think I finally found the letter that the Finance Committee wrote in 2013, where it was actually a nice piece of work by the Finance Committee. It was Scott, you were on the committee at the time. It was a long letter, because what it did was it analyzed a number of situations that were going on in town and analyzed a number of possibilities and recounted a lot of history. And but at the bottom, we said that yes, this is a conflict of interest, but it's okay in this particular case because of the personality involved, and that everybody was comfortable with it. and the auditor was not the same as the accountant. Which is another, the biggest check that you have is the auditor is independent of the accountant. If the accountant
And that report goes to the select board too, or it should, as opposed to be sent to just to Chris.
well,
We were trying to get copies of that report at one point and they were resisting. The year-end auditor's report.
I don't know if we really tried to get them or whether, I know I certainly made the comment that when I was in there doing the job, the finance committee came in when the auditor, the independent auditor gave his report to the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
And we have not been invited.
But
in
the
the last-
report needs to go above Chris.
But
Because
there's
if Chris
something in
did
there
something
that
wrong, no one would know
it
it.
has to be accepted by the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Yeah, but aren't they required to publish the auditor's report for consumption by the town? I mean, isn't that
I don't know. Certainly it's a record that you would have access to under
Yeah.
whatever the
That would
open
be a public
records law is, but whether they have to actually publish it as such, put it on the website or something like that, that might be a
Oh, you
different
mean
issue.
versus requesting it specifically?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, if you request it, you can get it.
okay.
You may get jerked around a little bit, but
we don't specifically say that the actual report and actual management letter have to be made available. We say it's make available, we don't say home. We should say to
well,
whom.
this says it's going to be placed on the website. There's wording in the thing that says now in the future, it'll be placed on the website after acceptance by the board.
No, it says the town administrator will post the results of the audit management letter on the town website once they are accepted by the select board.
The letter, not the actual report.
Just the results of the audit management letter, not the actual management letter.
So that could mean Chris's summary of what they say as opposed to the actual
Yeah, I
document.
suppose it could be.
Yeah, we could change that wording and perhaps we should. Now, the
John?
question, is there anything in the audit report that would be considered confidential under the law?
Well, there might be something in there.
John,
Yes,
this is Rich Demaraki. Could I speak?
sure.
I was
First
hoping
of all, the independent auditor produces an annual report, which is about 60 or 70 pages long, which very few people understand it because it's very complicated. That is a public document and anybody has access to it. In addition to that, the outside auditor produces a management letter, which is about 10 or 15 pages long. And in my opinion, that management letter is more important than the audited financial statement because it tells the reader the recommendations for improvement for various departments that could be advantageous to the town. I spoke up at the bylaw review meeting because I wanted to make sure that management letter was available to anyone who wanted to read it. And Chris Martin said that it would be posted on the town website after it was accepted.
The management letter.
The management letter.
Yeah.
Usually they hand out the annual report that the outside auditor produces. Normally in cities are big enough where they put the annual report together and the outside auditor reviews it. But for most towns, they don't have the people to actually put the report together. So in Granby, in a lot of small towns, the outside auditor actually generates or produces the annual report because it's so complicated. I think the last time it was like 60 pages long.
Well, it
So-
seems to me it's easy enough to tweak the language to reference the letter rather than the results of the letter.
Right, but in my opinion, the town administrator should not approve who the outside auditor is, because you're doing a report in the management letter, and in the back of your mind, you know who's paying your bill. It's the town administrator. He's hiring you and he's paying your bill. So some of the results that the outside auditor comes up with may be skewed a little bit. So I think the select board should approve who the outside auditor is each year, and not the
Yeah,
town
Chris
administrator.
could recommend and they could approve.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
It
That's
would,
the wording that I put in on my submission.
Yes, yeah. And I
yeah,
think-
it would, there'd be very little change. It's just that Chris could recommend them. They've used Scanlon, you know, for many, many years, to the outside auditor, and they do a good job. They do a good job, and but I still say the select board should approve what Chris recommends.
And that's really what we're after on the other things too.
Right,
Chris
Right,
recommend and the select board approve.
right. There'd be very little change. Chris could still do all the work as far as getting the final few or the final one that he wants appointed to do the work, but the selectmen should approve it. To me, that should really go along with the police and fire also.
I think we're all in agreement there.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we can, I think we've probably got the essence of the wording for the auditor. Then for the other positions, our choices then are still, I think, to say, we have to either, one, say something specifically that these are the responsibilities of the select board, or two, say something specifically that if the town administrator, the women have authority to appoint the police chief and the fire chief and the town accountant, that it is subject to the approval of the select board. Or third, we have to go through and really scrub the language in all the subsections so that all of the things that talk about the authority that the administrator has over the departments does not include the hiring of police chief and fire chief and accountant without the approval of the select board. And of all,
You really mean that? Because when I say, do you really mean it? Can you really think that it would be okay for us to say that, yeah, he can go ahead and appoint the police chief because the board of selectmen said okay? I
No.
don't. I mean, I
And
think that,
don't either. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want to remind everybody currently that in section 6, under phrase 8 that I read earlier, that's the language, I think, that John, based on what you're talking about, the town administrator shall inform the select board in writing of all appointments. Blah, 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 15 days, unless the select board votes by at least a 2/3 majority to disapprove the designated appointment. Okay?
I mean,
I mean, that's the language, John. I mean, the way I'm reading that, based on how you phrase this, that's the language that's being put in here, that in fact.
and
they-
I
and they
think,
just-
I think it needs to be repeated up in section 3 on the appointment authority, because right now that reads, I'm looking at Bob's, the town administrator shall appoint the commissions, committees, boards, department heads, or offices that the select board has placed under the town administrator's direction and supervision. And so right there, the fire department, the police department, or under the supervision, and it says there that the town administrator shall appoint the heads of those departments. That's the police chief and the fire chief. And however, that section does not specifically include wording that appointments have to be approved by 2/3 of the select board. And I think the reason it's important to be cautious and have it in both places is because I'm still not convinced, although I took steps to try to guard against the possibility that section 8 actually refers to the whole document and not just to section 7. And we've got to make absolutely certain that it refers to section 8. And I prefer that wording be in the section that the appointment of the police officer is. Now, and as far as appointing the police officer, if you need a 2/3 approval by the select board, I don't understand the difference between the effect of having town administrator appoint the person and then 2/3 of the select board agreeing, or 2/3 of the select board saying, this is going to be the new police officer, this is going to be the new you could conceivably save a search if the town administrator comes up as a result of the search saying, here's candidate X, and I think that should be the new police chief. And then the select board says, by 2/3 vote says, no, we disagree. Then you have to go back and do the search again.
Do they have plausible deniability if they don't approve it? Or they don't disapprove it, I mean? So Chris picks somebody, he hires them, and they're a failure, and the select board go, whoop, wasn't us.
No, we want them to approve it.
No, I know we
Yeah.
do, but the way it's written now,
The language has to be more, reading all of it, I mean, and listening to this for the last, few minutes or 15 minutes, whatever, the town administrator has to make recommendations for appointments to the select board, and the select board must approve the appointments. If you just allow appointing of a police chief or a fire chief, Scott's completely right, because they just go, couldn't get everybody together to vote, right? So after 15 days, they become the person, and nobody has anybody no responsibility for it except the town administrator. So to me, it feels more like the administrator should be making a recommendation of an appointment. The select board must approve that by a 2/3 vote, and then everybody's engaged. Because if it's just can lapse, then again, Scott's completely right.
do we all agree that that's the kind of wording we want to use, or
Well,
recommend and accept?
Recommend and accept is my preference.
Is that not good for you and John and Bob?
well, let me say again that there are at least 2 places in this chapter 3 where it says the town administrator gets to appoint the people who work for him, the department heads who work for them. And unless a specific exception is carved out every time that language is used, you're in the situation you'll either have a conflict in the bylaws or else it won't make any sense.
So does Al Wishart answer to Chris Martin now?
He reports, the police chief and the fire chief, the fire department and the police department report to the town administrator. And let me tell you, when the town administrator was first hired, when we switched over from Bob in his position to a town administrator position, when Bob was there under the bylaws, all those departments, I think, really kind of reported to the select board. And Bob was designated for supervision of stuff. But I remember during budget times, they'd make their pitch directly to the select board. And if they had a beef with something, they'd go to the select board. And it took a while for the select board to understand that they should not be accepting that kind of operation, that it has to go through the appropriate chain of command. You have to talk to Chris first, and then you have no right to come to the select board as a department head. So we're maybe still having growing pains, and we're maybe still not past all of them, but the bylaws right now, when they first started, people didn't buy them. They were used to the old way of operating.
I think what's bugging me in this is that I don't see how easy or difficult it would be for the selectmen to take away the authority that they've already given to the town administrator.
If it's
Say
in the
that-
bylaw, go
Pardon?
ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, as an example, when you have a brand new town administrator, somehow or other, it has to be conveyed to him who he's responsible for, or who's reporting to him. And how do you so you say the police department is in there, and all of a sudden you realize that this person just really can't handle the concept of policing, and you have to take it back. If your bylaws have spelled out that the police chief reports to the town administrator come hell or high water, you're not just passing on the job. It's gone. It's with
Right.
the TA at that point.
Right.
And I'm concerned about how you get it back. How do the selectmen recover a duty that they've passed on to the TA?
If it's in the bylaw, I don't think they can. If it's in the employment contract, I don't think that they necessarily can. If it's the wording that you have now for the appointment authority, does not mention any specific department. That's good, but I think then we just have to strengthen this and say that all department heads have to be approved by the select board.
In other words, all the appointments stay with the Board of Selectmen. Is that what you're
Well-
saying? Because that would seem to do it.
Yeah, because the alternative, if from what you're saying, if we mention the fire department and the town accountant and the
Highway.
police department, if we mention them specifically, then the implication in the bylaws is they report to the town administrator as a bylaw.
Which means that, yes, and which means that
Which
that
means
isn't a duty that the Board of Selectmen has given to him. It's one that he's acquired
Yeah.
by virtue of the bylaw.
So if we want to make certain that the select board has this authority to, in the best interest of the town, to change who reports to whom, then we got to make sure that it isn't in the bylaw. And probably because of the language that we used, then we have to broaden that to say if we want anybody, if we want department heads to be approved by, any department heads to be approved by the select board, probably all department heads have to be approved by the select board.
Seems to me that where we're at is the consequence of getting more efficient, the things that we wanted early on from a town administrator. The logical consequence appears to me now that, hey, isn't it logical that I handle the police chief and I handle the fire chief and I just handle everybody? After all, I'm the administrator of your town government. And
Right.
so the logic of all of this language, what I'm just saying, I don't agree with that because I want democracy, but the consequence of the select board giving up the messy part of the budgeting where the departments could come to them and then they would consult with the town administrator. It's now, hey, in the interest of efficiency, we're just logically pushing it all up to the town administrator. All the power goes there. And select board's a rubber stamp. So.
No, well, the budget is different. I don't think that is just an efficiency. I think that those are really the town administrators. That's the town administrator's budget. We call it the police budget, we call it the fire budget, but basically it's all part of the town administrator's budget. The town administrator it's his budget as much as it is the police chief's budget. The town administrator is in charge of that department. So I think it goes beyond efficiency.
Yeah, but aren't we really just trying to solve the issue of the language around the appointment of these roles and approval? Isn't that what we're really trying to solve? Because when we solve that, we keep the separations that we want, because our issue, from my understanding, is that, in order to prevent and protect against corruption, essentially, or bad practices, by having the town administrator bring forth a candidate for appointment to the select board. The select board then has to vote by a 2/3 majority to approve that appointment. That still leaves the town administrator to select who they want, and then the veto really lies with the select board if for some reason they don't like what they see here or know about the candidate. So
Yeah. And
that protects us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it actually goes really a lot further than that, because the way you would expect things to operate is this. A new town administrator is hired. Then one time, the select board has to sit and think and formally say, all right, you're the new town administrator. We want these departments to report to you. And then one time, the town administrator has to say, okay, so-and-so is my police chief, so-and-so is my fire chief, so-and-so is the head of my highway department, so-and-so is the head of the building department, so-and-so is said of such and such and such and such. And the selectmen say, okay, we're gonna take a vote on that. Yep, we agree by 2/3. And then that is done until a major problem is. I mean, this isn't something that has to happen every 6 months or every year or every 2 years or ever again until a problem arises. And as Bob suggests, the selectmen decide that things just aren't working. We've got to reshuffle who is reporting to the town administrator. So it doesn't seem to me to be a burden.
I think it's a
To make it a
responsibility.
bylaw, is that what you're saying? It's not a burden to make it a bylaw?
Not a burden on anybody. It's not a burden on the town administrator, and it's not a burden on the select board. To say that at the beginning of the town administrator's employment, that he or she names these people, the select board agrees, and then that's done unless there's a major problem that arises. It never has to be done again unless a major problem arises.
Or
But
there's a vacancy and they need to reappoint and they need to appoint somebody else. The chief retires, we need a new one, etc.
Correct.
So where does section 3 of chapter 3 sit? Are we still eliminating the police chief and
Well,
the fire chief?
If you have Bob's copy, if you have a copy of the stuff,
Yeah, no, I read Bob's copy.
okay. Yeah, that doesn't name anybody in specific. It's town administrator shall appoint the commissions, committees, boards, department heads, or offices placed under the town administrator direction. And department heads is the key thing there. Then what I think we have to do is we have to add to section 3 the same language that is in section 8. The town administrator shall inform the board in writing of all these appointments. The appointment shall be effective 15 calendar days after receipt of such written notification, unless the select board vote by at least a 2/3 majority vote to disapprove specifically designated appointment or appointments. And I think that takes care of that. And that it is very specifically and clear that 2/3 approval thing applies to this section, not just to the section later on.
But John, don't we want them to approve it? Because again, to Scott's point, if they say they must disapprove within 15 days, if they just choose not to meet for 15 days, then it becomes effective without a vote. So if we say they must vote to approve by a 2/3 majority, then we are keeping the responsibility with the select board.
Right, so that's conditional. So I would just say conditional upon the approval of the select board.
By a
Saying the
2/3
same
vote.
thing, right?
What we can say is that we can just change the language and say that the select board shall meet within 15 days after notification by the town administrator and vote to approve or disapprove the appointment. The appointments are effective immediately upon approval by the select board.
Okay,
Sure.
Sounds good.
yes.
I want to
voted-
just protect what Scott brought up because I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's good. All right, Bob, does that,
Okay, so my last question is, is the town administrator still appointing the fire chief, and then we're doing post-approval by the, so we've still given all the power to him. What we've said is that the select board has the right to disapprove any appointment,
Well,
but it's in the purvey of the administrator to choose for appointment, you know, the fire chief and the police chief and the auditor.
If I were a select board member, here's how I would approach that. If I saw the town administrator going off on his or her own, not involving anybody else, going to pick out a police chief and a fire chief, right at that moment, I would ask the select board to take away the authority from the town administrator to run the police department or the fire department. Take it back to the select board long enough to get a fire chief or police chief search done and hired. And then after that, turn it back to the administrator. Does the select board will have that power because they have not given away that position. They have not given away that operating
Their
authority.
approval.
Yeah,
I
well,
know,
they have
but he's
the
still
operating authority in the bylaws. They only give it away in what they say to the town administrator as his or her duties.
Yeah, but right now, to me, the language reads that the town administrator is still appointing first. And then after he appoints, so he picks and he appoints, because that's his power. He doesn't have to go to a board or involve them. He's got that power. And now you say yes or no. That's
No, he
what-
doesn't.
Recommend, he
Let me talk-
recommends, not approves.
Not
He
appoints,
recommends
not appoints.
Right,
and the board
Right.
approves.
right,
Yeah,
exactly right.
and the
He
board.
can do all the
approves
work
or-
and pick out 3 guys and bring them in, and the select board has the final say.
See, there's a balance of power here that means if they don't work together, basically either one of them can call the whole thing off.
Right.
And that I think is, I mean, that's an inherent balance of power, and which is fine.
Okay,
Seems
I'm
to
all for checks and balances. So if that works, okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Bob,
I'm
do you
still
know?
not sure if the language is going to work out, but it answered my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob, can you see a difference between the select board needing a 2/3 approval versus having 2/3 appointing authority? What's the difference if, in fact, the select board can just take the authority away from, can temporarily take the department away from the select board? I mean, take the department away from the administrator.
I don't think it would be that easy to take the power away from the administrator. Because probably someplace in there, you're gonna have cause. And picking someone they didn't like wouldn't seem to be cause.
And now
Picking
it's,
someone with something really bad against them, in their file, that would be improper, but
What about the 2/3 vote? If the administrator picks somebody that they don't want, they just vote 2/3 against it.
Yeah.
You know,
So then they're working together.
They got to.
Right. That's what we want. Not
If-
all the power with Chris.
If the town administrator can, we don't be talking about town administrator as a particular person. If the town administrator can convince 2/3 of the select board to choose candidate Y, then the fact that the 3rd select board member disagrees doesn't make any difference in the law.
do you think in there when you use the word the TA appoints the department head subject to the affirmation of the Board of Selectmen? Would that,
It's a fancier way to say the same thing, right?
pardon?
It's a fancier way to say the same thing.
But I think
but-
that's the language that it's sort of use now as it relates to, we'll say, the finance committee, where we're something or other by the town moderator, but it has to go to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, we're nominated, but we're nominated by the town moderator. And then the select board
Subject to approval.
approves or disapproves and makes the appointment.
Yeah, that's good wording.
Let me see if I can find exactly what it says. Finance Committee, nominated to the office by the moderator and confirmed in this office by a majority of the select board. We probably want something a little bit stronger than confirmed. Since I think
What was your
complete,
word, Bob?
I'm sorry, what?
What was Bob's word?
I use the word
Affirmed.
affirmed.
Confirmed, yeah.
That's
The,
not much different than confirmed.
I think that we have to be careful that my impression is that a fire chief and a police chief need to be appointed. I think the Mass General Law uses the word appoint for those positions.
So at that point, it would be better to use the word recommend candidate, a recommended department head to the Board of Selectmen.
Subject to approval.
Recommended appointment subject to the 2/3 vote,
So the
positive
select-
vote or approved vote of the select board. I mean, I think they need to recommend an appointment is the right language. Because if everybody did their jobs, then it should be a slam dunk when it goes to the select board, because they would have fully vetted the candidates and not want conflict, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, looking here at the, section 3 says town administrator shall appoint the commissions, committees, boards, department heads, or offices under their administration. And in section 7, it says appoint and remove department heads, officials of the town, members of boards and commissions, employers, report directly to the town administrator. Such appointments and removals shall be subject to town bylaws, personnel, and state statutes. And then the next thing says the town administrator shall inform the select board in writing of all appointments, and the appointments shall be effective unless they're specifically disapproved within 15 days. So both of those, the language in both of those things, has to be changed to be made the same. And we can put into more restrictive language that it applies to, the recommendation applies to everybody. It's,
I mean, he needs to recommend appointments for department heads to the select board for confirmation by a 2/3 vote of the select board.
Sounds good to me.
recommend appointments to the select board.
Subject.
Subject to confirmation by a 2/3 vote.
I'd use the word approval.
Subject to,
So that's fine. Approval's
Or
fine too,
appointment,
Bob.
rather. Pardon?
Subject to approval.
Subject to
Subject to
approval's
appoint-
fine.
No, subject to appointment, because John made the point that the law sort of uses the word appoint for the police chief and the fire chief, certainly.
Subject
But you'd
to
have to say
appointment
all appointments must be approved by a 2/3 vote of the select board.
Who's making
So
the,
you're
appoint-
using approve and appointment in the sentence.
who's making the appointment?
The town administrator will make recommendations for appointments of department heads to the select board. The select board must vote to approve all appointments by a 2/3 vote of the select board.
There's no worming around that. That's good.
Who's making the appointment?
Like I said, the town administrator is the person making the recommendation
Recommended
for appointment.
appointment.
The select board is confirming the appointment or approving the appointment.
Okay, so then the wording would be basically, and approve subject to the vote at the top. Let me reword that again.
So to your question, John, I
Okay,
think what
so-
you're asking is who's making the appointment?
Yeah,
Ultimately, the select board is making the appointment based on the recommendation of the administrator.
So town administrator recommends and appoints.
no.
He doesn't have the
No.
authority to
Subject
appoint.
to approval by the select board.
Right.
He doesn't have the authority to appoint. That's what we're trying to avoid. He makes recommendations for appointments of department heads to the select board. The select board then must affirm, confirm, approve, whatever we want to use for a word, those appointments by a 2/3 vote.
Okay,
In the end, the select board is the one making the appointment based on a recommendation from the town administrator. We're trying to get them all to work together, and that's how you do it.
okay.
John?
Yeah, just thinking I'm
Let
right.
him write. Yeah, let's,
I believe that solves our conflict issues and provides good oversight of the process.
mhm.
Because if the town administrator is just picking and saying and appointing, then to our points from last night, the select board has abdicated all responsibility. And it also goes to Scott's point earlier. They just shrug their shoulders and say, we didn't appoint him. We just appointed the administrator. He picked the people who works for him. We can't help their bad.
I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball in here. See if I can find where it is. Where we're talking about someplace in the new wording. It says we recommend on department heads.
Yeah.
But they're separate from boards and commissions.
Yeah, no, we gotta have the same language.
Conceivably are.
Yeah, we gotta have the same language in both. It's gotta apply to all the people.
It's everybody. You want it to be everybody.
Yep, it should be. It should be. It should be everybody because ultimately the select board are the elected officials of the town who are responsible to the voters. They make a decision to hire a town administrator who then makes recommendations or, to the select board. The select board then has the responsibility to approve those recommendations in any board, committee, or appointment of a department head.
All right, now let's try the other side of the coin. Removal.
I would
Removal
say it
would
works the
be,
same way backwards.
yeah, it's
But-
exactly.
But the
that.
wording,
It works-
the wording, I don't think the wording says that.
It should say that, it should, and again, there's lots of reasons why somebody could be removed, but it should work the same way in reverse, that the town administrator would bring forth, recommendations for removal to the select board. The select board would then vote by a 2/3 majority to terminate the employment or person from the committee, board, whatever.
Right.
Okay, I don't differ with that.
Wait a minute. We'll have a situation where the town administrator has recommended someone. So the town administrator thinks this person is qualified, will work out well in the position, everything that goes along with that. So they recommend to the select board agrees and makes the appointment. Then the town administrator, after working with the person for a while, decides that person just really isn't what he or she needs in that position, and has done some things which really warrant being fired. Why shouldn't that person's boss, as a town administrator, say this person can't work for me anymore? Why do they need somebody else's permission to, this has to be done in accordance with the personnel board bylaws, and certainly the lawyer will be consulted, but why do you need the select board's authority to
Hiring and firing is usually together, from my experience.
Yeah, and interestingly, John, in the private sector, again, and these are department heads. So in the private sector, these would be, considered director level or above. In the private sector, anytime that we are going to remove a director level or above, it obviously involves, human resources personnel. And then, I have to go to, my executive director to get approval to, based on the work with human resources to remove that person. I just think from an oversight perspective, you wouldn't want, what if you have a town administrator who is knee-jerk and just doesn't get along with people? You got a great chief and they're politically opposed in their viewpoints, and he goes, yeah, I can't work with this guy, I'm just going to fire him. Well, that's no good either, right? Because even if he goes to the lawyer and the lawyer says, well, you have cause, he was belligerent because he didn't agree with you on something, or, it's tricky. I think you have to protect.
They need to work together.
Right. I agree, Scott.
But let me try one other thing then. Suppose, for example, because the difference is that the people that we're giving the ultimate authority to are not running a business, they're politicians. They're running a political office. And so if all goes well and the person really has made a mess of things and they deserve to be fired, what do you do when basically it turns out to be the nephew of a select board member?
Should never have been hired.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's tricky because they're elected officials. Yeah, but because they're elected officials, the person could be elected after this person's been employed for the town for 20 plus years, and then their son gets elected to the select board, right? That's possible, right?
Yep.
So I think, clearly a select board, a select person sitting on the board would not want somebody from their family applying for a position just because of the conflict of interest, right? So
My experience in the private sector was I would never get rid of a direct report without telling my boss.
Yeah.
I mean, and if nothing else, just to cover the backside.
Right.
Just
That's how
remember,
my world works.
just remember,
My world
these
works that way.
positions that we're talking about are ruled by a police contract and a fire contract. And so when we go through that process of letting him go, there's no simple thing. I mean, the contract, the unions, all of that is going to come into play.
They should
So if
act
you
in
leave the
concert.
authority with the administrator to fire that person, well, I mean, that's logical because there's also the control factor of the contract.
The language includes employees.
And I understand that. And if you're an employee, the administrator, as the head boss, because we're not so big, I understand all these chain of commands and stuff, should have the right to fire that person.
Recommend,
On the front end, the
Recommend
select
firing.
board administrated and made those voting decisions to put them in. But once it happens, the responsibility to supervise and make decisions and manage resides in the town administrator. And therefore, even though I understand, Rich, your logic, therefore I would still believe that it would make sense to basically leave the firing authority with the town administrator.
You won't
I can
make the
buy
same
the firing.
same logical statement when it comes to the hiring.
I'm sorry, what?
With the hiring, you say somebody else ought to approve. I think firing is just as important and just as difficult and complicated, maybe even more complicated.
right. You need to
Well,
work
yeah.
together, especially with a contract.
Right, and like an
Yeah, union.
accountant, yeah, I mean, the police and fire are very different because of the unions and the contracts, but a town accountant isn't gonna be, on a contract, right? They're gonna have a
Well,
An
offer and
employee.
acceptance, and they're an at-will employee,
Right.
but if they're doing something, that we don't like, the town administrator, needs to bring that to the select board. It creates transparency, it provides, everybody to have an open forum, because if the accountant just gets fired, then there's all the, what did they do? Why did they get fired? If there's transparency across the select board, then I just think it protects the town.
But it's micromanagement. And I think we're trying to avoid, because what we're saying is we're vesting authority in the town administrator. And I agree with keeping the decision to hire vested with the select board. But once we hire somebody, let's take the guy that we have our faith in and management to go through. And guess what? If they make a bad decision and we find out what's up, well, we can fire the town administrator, we can reprimand him. So we do have some control on that back end. And I would just say that as a manager, if I didn't even have firing authority, to make those decisions, I mean, yes, I would consult with somebody, out of best practices, but I still had that ultimate firing authority. And to me, that's important as a manager anyway.
But no place in the stuff that has been written up about the town administrator is he been designated as the chief executive officer of the town. He's the administrative officer. And there's a hell of a lot of difference between those two words. I mean, he's not God. He is answerable to someone.
It's not answerable
Yeah, I
to
mean, the CEO and the president of a company are answerable to the board of directors. In this case, the select board is basically the board of directors, correct?
Yes.
So he's answerable to them the way it's set up. There's what causes the conflict here is the different levels of position. A police chief and a fire chief, firing a police chief or a fire chief is very different than firing a town accountant or the highway department head or something like that, right?
mentions
They're very different optics to it.
but it
So
includes
appointment versus employee.
the
Do we make that
language.
difference?
Let me just make sure we're all talking about the same thing. The language in section 9 about removing people includes the word employees. So this means, for example, you had a reorganization and you want to eliminate one person from the, or let's say a budget does not allow the same number of people working in the highway department as we have now. So one person has to be eliminated. You have to fire an employee. That should go through the approval of the select board as to which one that is.
No, absolutely not. That has to.
Go back, John, you
that
said
can't be.
employees, but it's employees that report directly to the town administrator. It's not all other town employees.
Yeah, it's direct reports, isn't it, John?
Employees who report directly, right?
Okay.
But
So it's
everybody
direct reports.
reports directly. We're too
No, they
small.
report to their manager. A police officer reports to their police chief, not to the town administrator. The police chief reports to the town administrator. I report to the EVP in my company. I don't report to, and the EVP reports to the CEO. So I don't report to the CEO. I report to the EVP.
Right, right.
So I would divide the language up to treat the decision to fire like a department head, you know, would require the approval of the select board, but the decision to fire employees, meaning not department heads, would reside with the town administrator.
No, resides with the department head of that department with
Okay.
consultation of the town
Okay.
administrator.
Okay, you're correct. You're correct, because police and fire.
Direct hires or direct.
Yeah, direct
what was the
report.
Wording there?
Direct
Direct
reports.
report.
Right.
Yeah, each of the town department heads has the authority to hire and fire. Again, but you're going always one level up for approval, right? So if the police chief is going to fire a sergeant on the police force, he should be going to the town administrator to cover his ass in doing so, right? Oh, sorry,
Right.
swearing.
Okay, well, the language then, since it says employees who report directly to the town administrator, right now, it says he has to consult, the town administrator has to consult with select board prior to removing anybody. There's nothing in it right now that says needs the approval. We want to add the language that they need approval rather than consult with. This is section
I think
9.
it should be there.
I think so too.
I
Yeah,
agree.
if you're firing somebody under a big contract, like most of those departments, not everybody, yeah, you need approval because there could be significant financial consequences to the town.
Which article is that? A warrant article?
Number 9,
That's right, exactly. Something didn't work right that time.
Yeah, all right.
section
It's not
6.
like it didn't
number 9.
happen.
Section 6, number 9. Is
Yes.
it? All right, well, I can write parallel language for the appointment and the firing. Is that right? That's what we want to do?
Yes.
All right, well then, let me ask a question. There's a section here called appointment authority.
Under whom?
It sounds to me that we should just remove that section on appointment authority. Just get rid of it. Because basically, it says the exact same thing as section 7 under the subsection 7, subparagraph 7, whatever, under section 6, which is the appoint and remove department heads.
Mhm.
And so it was repeated earlier, but in the earlier repeat, it had all the specific departments named and had the police and fire chief named and so on. But what we should really be doing then, I think, is eliminating section 3 as a separate section and folding it into this subsection 7.
That would make sense.
Or pull
Yeah.
7 out and make it,
We
In
changed
section
that,
3.
so 7 basically becomes 3. We changed the wording. 7 basically becomes 3. And then the portion about the 15 days would be handled in 8, and then the removal would be handled in 9 with parallel language to 8. How does that sound?
Yeah,
Let me just-
it makes sense, John, from a flow perspective, and eliminating, duplication of the same topic.
Yeah,
Let me throw this out. How about if you took all those three subsections, 7, 8, and 9, and throw them all in under section 3? Because they all deal with appointments or removal of people.
could do that too.
Yep.
Simple.
Then appointment authority, should we try to rename that section? Personnel.
You could name it, you could call it appointment process. Because what you're doing is it's a process of appointment and approval. So, I mean, there's a better word probably than process, but something
Procedure,
along that line.
policy, procedure.
Procedure is a good one.
Just offhand, the terminology used for the Board of Selectmen is authority to appoint.
I think we agree with that, right? That
Well,
terminology.
no, just the heading of the thing. It says authority to appoint. This says appointment authority.
Oh,
Right.
Well,
It isn't consistent.
Also, notice section 5 is appointments by the town administrator.
authority to appoint, I like that.
There is
So
none.
does section 5 also get collapsed in here along with 7, 8, and 9?
No, this
into
is for
section 3?
different. This is for a different collection of people.
Okay.
Like, the we've just taken away the actual appointing authority from the town administrator. Haven't we?
No, we've taken away his appointment authority, but he still has all the authority to bring forth candidates to recommend for approval.
Shy of
And then
final approval.
The appointment resides with the select board where it should. I mean, in the private sector, an EVP or chief anything has to be approved by the board of directors. The CEO comes to the board of directors and says, I want to make, Bob Glessman the executive vice president of whatever. The board of directors then has to vote on that appointment by the president and CEO to affirm that appointment. Now, it's usually a slam dunk because they've worked together and they agree that Bob Glessman is a great guy and does a great job. But there's also cases where they go, hold on, I'm not so sure, right? And that's what you want, is that oversight.
What if we call it personnel approval?
Is it department head approval or personnel?
It includes commissions, committees, boards, department heads. and
Okay.
employees.
Okay.
How about
And
appointment
personnel.
procedure?
What was that, Bob?
Appointment procedure.
It's only for the town administrator. The section 5 talks about giving the appointing approval, basically the town administrator for the people who are hired under the people who report to him.
So are we, John, are we adding section 5 to section 3 along with
No,
section 7, 8, and 9?
keep them separate. Section 3 refers only to the town administrator and his or her direct reports.
Right.
Section 5 refers to the people who are hired by the people who are direct reports of the town administrator. And there, the town administrator does have the authority to appoint them
Yeah.
without asking the select board.
And that's fine.
Okay.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah, yeah, but they should be kept separate.
Correct.
But we're still moving section 7, 8, and 9 from section 6 to section 3.
To subsection 7, 8, and 9.
Yes,
Up to section 3.
in section 6, right. Okay.
Hey, Rich, how much does that job pay?
I'm not telling.
Got some good letters, EVP, huh?
Yeah, I can tell you his bonus last year was 1.5 million. So
I do it for less than that.
Give it a discount.
Okay. All right, I have to work on that. I didn't really see anything much in 5 or the introduction there in 6. Joe brought up one interesting point about subsection 1 under subsection 6. And after he pointed it out, it really kind of just dawned on me what the consequences of not doing it are. Here's what he pointed out. Under subsection 1, supervise and direct the activities of the town's department heads, boards, commissions, and officials now under the jurisdiction of the select board. And he suggested we just take out the word now. And I started thinking about it, and I said, yeah, because otherwise somebody's going to have to keep a record of exactly the way the things are now. It doesn't mean now. It means that the idea of how things work now is what they want, but it's not exactly what is now, kept forever into the future. So we just got to take out the word now out of subsection 1.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like a living document kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's not, otherwise we're going to ask, who's going to be in charge of keeping the record of exactly the way things are now that people report to people? It's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Would now mean exactly now at the time that these bylaws are adopted.
Now
And
either
then
means now or it doesn't.
add something in the future too. So anyway,
Doesn't seem appropriate.
we don't need to dwell on it. So, okay. So the thing I would like to say is I guess in reading some of the state stuff, I saw the word state used, but you know, we talk about state statutes, but we're a commonwealth, we're not a state, but
Yeah,
I guess
we've
it
already,
doesn't matter.
yeah, we already use state in our narrative every year. We talk about the state,
Okay.
state aid, and stuff like that. So I wouldn't worry about that one.
No, well, I did see that I get a newsletter from the state auditor periodically, and in her content tonight when I got it, she did use the word state auditor, so I guess it doesn't matter. So, okay.
All right. Now let's go down to 12.
Mhm.
That's the tag sales.
No, this is,
Being silly, sorry.
yeah. There could be a section 12 under tag sales. There's probably 50 sections under tag sales. I've purposely stayed away from that one entirely.
By the way, did you notice that on the forum this afternoon, all the many comments about the bylaw changes, made their way back onto the forum.
I don't look at the forum. Is that a Facebook thing or is that a separate?
That's a Facebook thing. Rich is
Is that,
there.
so
On
because
there.
you mentioned it, is that a coinky dink, John, or Bob?
Well, what happened was, when I read it every day just to see what's going on and what the scoop is and so forth. And on Monday, there were quite a few comments relative to bylaw changes, most of them dealing with tag sales. A couple of people that, if Rich goes enough, he'll remember the names, but I won't use them. But in any event, it was there. And then the next morning, I went back and I'm looking, and the first thing I see is Al Bale, my neighbor, with a comment about liberty and freedom and the tag sales and so forth.
Yeah, I
And-
read
and
that. I read that.
Comments, but the other 35 comments are gone. And they've been gone up until today, and lo and behold, they showed up again. It's now up to 77 comments. So don't ask me why they disappeared, but it was interesting that they didn't really get lost. They just weren't being made available somehow or other.
Sounds magical.
So who runs that Facebook page?
I wouldn't want to, I don't want to talk about that.
Okay, because he did that, the
But there's a number
that's
of,
the person that
there's a
controls.
number of administrators of it.
Okay. I don't use Facebook for security purposes. I mean, I have an account.
Well,
but
this you can go just look at. You don't have to even do anything other than put your name in and you can get access to it.
Yeah, well, for me.
You don't have to put your picture in or anything, or any information about yourself.
I
If you
know,
want
but
to join the forum, that's another story.
Yeah.
Depending
So,
upon your
anyway.
comments, can they find a suitable picture to put in?
Mhm.
Pardon?
Depending upon your comments, can the operator of the website of the forum find a suitable picture to include with your name?
I don't,
That's
no,
not
I
the
don't
way
think
it
so.
works,
Because
John.
it wouldn't be the administrator of the forum. It would be Facebook itself would have to do it.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
no,
go
they
to,
can attach a cartoon character, right? You know, like those devil dogs, I mean, beyond emojis, and we'll go there now. So. Okay,
Go-
John, 12.
go to subsection 12. This is the thing about preparing the budget. And the first thing is the current version has the word approval for approval. And that's absolutely incorrect. That the whole budget process clearly spells out that there's no approvals needed, that the town administrator puts together a budget. He gives it to the finance committee and he gives it to the select board. And each of them then has the right to put in the town meeting booklet. First of all, then the town meeting booklet will contain the town administrator's budget instead of the finance committee's budget. But both the finance committee and the select board have the opportunity to put in there specifically anything that they have a different recommendation about for a budget item, different recommended amounts. But that is not an approval. If, for example, the select board have to approve the town administrator's budget before it goes in, then that just wipes out all the authority that we were trying to give to the town administrator to make his or her opinion known. They simply deny putting it in. And that's incorrect. And it's not the way that the section 4 works. So the word approval has to come out of there. And the second thing is that there's a time question here. The way it originally read was just that it has to give the budget to the select board and the finance committee prior, so it's enabled them to make recommendations about the budget in the town meeting book and so on. And that needs to be tightened up. And I suggested that it be done within 5 business days after the town administrator gets the budget together. And and Bob suggested that we make it 30 business days prior to the annual town meeting. But my question is this. In past years, when we've had two meetings and they've been a month apart. The first meeting handles basically almost all the warrant articles except for the budget. And then the second meeting handles the budget, has the warrant article on the budget. And also some things that are dependent upon a budget having been passed. And one of the things that we've known in the past is that the budget hasn't actually been ready by the first town meeting. In the sense that, yeah, sure, there's been drafts of the budgets in draft form and everybody's taken a look at the draft form, but we have never known, and I don't think I realistically expect to ever know exactly what the state legislature is committing, state legislature and governor are committing for state aid, different pots that it's going into, other things like that, until well after the date of our first annual meeting, and many times until after the date of the second annual meeting. And so I don't think that we've actually ever published the budget before the time of the town meeting. The warrant article itself doesn't list the whole budget. And I don't know if we've been required to produce the budget booklet for the first town meeting, because that does contain the whole budget in it, or whether or whether that's been held back until the second one. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Does the town booklet, is that given out at the first of the town meetings, or is it given out later?
Later.
I'd say later when we actually discuss it.
Yeah, because there's
Yeah, later, John.
frequently wording in it that says addressed at the, whatever the prior meeting was.
Yeah.
And it has, and the booklet has all the budget stuff in it. So
If that's published, we basically have the budget to do at the first meeting we want. And I don't think that's happened. That's not really been the budget process.
But then
Maybe
you
I didn't
rely on
answer
those
the right-
people to have to bring it back to discuss it at the second meeting.
You would have to rely on,
People to remember to bring it with them.
well, yeah, except that there are no figures in it. In the
wait a
warrant,
minute.
on the warrant article, the figures in the warrant article, there are figures in the booklet, the town meeting
In
booklet.
the booklet, yes.
Yeah.
And the way it's gone is our deadline has been based upon when we're gonna actually have the meeting that decides on the budget.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I think has happened.
Distinct from the ward annual town meeting, it's for when the financial stuff is being conducted.
And that's why I don't think we want to require this 30 business days prior to the annual town meeting. But I think we do need it within 5 days after the administrator gets it, and the administrator knows that everybody else has to have their version of the budget ready to go for the publication. So he can't wait until the day before publication.
Right. So are we tying the time that we need based on X number of days prior to publication of the town booklet?
That's sort of that's what I was trying to,
Because then, no matter what the schedule is, they know that we're being even though our time is compacted, they're being forced to deliver to us to at least give us a little bit of time. But if you look at the whole process, we're getting these iterations, as we go through the process over these several months. So therefore, whatever the final thing is, if we disagree or we want to write something different, I think pretty much ahead of time, we're going to know what's happening. So we would already have time to formulate whatever written or verbal response we as a committee want to deliver.
If we mention the publishing deadline for the annual town meeting booklet, then we wanted a certain amount of time before that. How much time do we need? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 30 days?
30 days.
I think that's where I came up with the 30 days, though it was not a magic number.
But it's
I mean, I
unrealistic.
was thinking of, we needed 30 days to get everything in order so that it could get published.
I just think 30 days is unrealistic
Why?
because I don't think, in the way we go through the process, I just don't see how we get, because we're talking about getting the final budget, right? 30 days ahead of time? Or just a draft of the budget?
What do you think, it should be less or more, so I can follow your train of thought?
Well, no, what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I like 30 days. Is 30 days realistic?
You mean, is it,
Given the overall process, you know, oh man, come on, now these guys want 30 days. That's unrealistic. We've never given them 30 days on the final budget. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been on the committee in forever, so.
well,
So,
we got
but I'm just
30
bringing
days
it
this
up.
year. We
Pardon?
got the budget from Chris back, right around between the 5th and the 10th of April.
Okay, well, then it's
And we
realistic.
submitted it the middle of this month, so we had probably five weeks.
Okay, then it's realistic. I just want something that's realistic.
Yeah, 20 business days is maybe enough time, but it's always been in draft form before that. I'm just trying to think that we've got the example of the last 2 years, well, particularly last year, where things were in such a state of flux that drafts really were drafts because there were not a lot of facts available to anybody for a long, long time. And then finally, when we had the facts or thought we had the facts available to us, and the administrator had the facts available to him, as the year wore on, it turns out that those facts were incorrect. But so there are some reasons, but they're usually during extraordinary times where it takes that much longer. 30 days is many times past years has been about the length of time between the first and second town meeting. If the town votes to keep 2 specific days for meetings, the second and the fourth Monday in May, then in order to meet publication times and everything like that, that would mean that the budget really would have to be in final form by the second Tuesday in May. I mean, no question. So that when we have the first town meeting, the budget would have to be determined then. Really, the only reason for having a second meeting is to do the budget, because the meeting usually takes so long to do all the warrant articles and the budget. So you'd be in the situation where it really forces everything to be done with what we know has never been complete information, or even a hint of what complete information is more likely to be from the state by that first day in May. And that's why our contention is that it doesn't make any sense to tie us down, because normally you don't have enough information by then to do the budget. So then you're forced to either say, well, the second day doesn't mean anything because the town moderator can just say we're not having the meeting, or you come to the meeting and the budget ready, so the meeting has to be continued after that to the budget. There's nothing there that does now, nor should it, force the budget to be done by that fourth Monday in May, which makes then, to me, the whole point moot about whether you meet on the fourth Tuesday. You can't accomplish what people seems to think it wants you to be accomplished in any reasonable fashion, according to the procedures and the policies and the financial policies that we follow now. So maybe 30 days is okay, but we would run into it. For example, if we have to have next year 30 days before May, it would put us right up to, well, still the same thing would be. Then the deadline, the publishing deadline would basically be the date of the first town meeting. So the budget wouldn't be ready for publication until after the first town meeting, but it would be for the second. But that then means that we're basically changing fundamentally either the conservative principles that are now built into the whole budget system for the benefit of the town of Granby, or else saying, well, we're going to have to go in and if the schools want another X amount of money, we'd have to realize that they'd be asking for that without, in fact, knowing how much money they're going to be getting from other sources. Right. So it creates a mess, but the people may vote for it.
The other thing you could create, based on what you just said, would be they would deliver the final town budget 5 business days after the conclusion of the first annual town meeting, the first of 2 annual town meetings.
No, because the purpose of the second meeting in May was by a group who wanted to force the budget to be done by then.
Okay, I
And
get you.
that's because of their own management problems.
Okay,
Well, that may very well not be practical. It's beyond our controls.
It is. It is.
So I think all we can do is work off the publication date
Okay, 30 days before publication date?
yep,
of the annual town meeting booklet or whatever it's
Yeah.
called.
yes.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to do it. By the way, I happen to check the feed Bob was talking about earlier. If you do get on there and you go to the feed at all on Granby, and you go deep into the comments, there's an awful lot of negative comments regarding the TA bylaw.
A couple of people are bad mouthing the fact that he's going to have authority and he doesn't live in town.
Yeah, so there's a fair amount of negative feedback on that from a group. So it'll be interesting, how that plays. But people are far more interested in the tag sales and the noise ordinances than anything else. So
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Just offhand, while we're on this article, I changed, and I did it in one of the other ones. I got rid of the capital letters on budget officer in this case, and then back or forward, wherever it was, where it was chief administrative officer and financial officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I made and didn't capitalize them, because to my way of thinking, capitalizing them makes it a position. And I was using the word serve as, and then with the small caps, which means he's performing the functions of, but he doesn't have the title.
Okay.
agreed. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
Okay, if I could ask a question, John, on 12, I mean, he's the chief administrative officer, the chief financial officer, the chief procurement officer, and now the budget officer.
Right.
Why do we need budget officer? Why add another name? I mean, doesn't the budget fall under the CFO, for example, or does that give him, or does that now make it capitalized, as Bob said, so therefore some kind of?
No, the financial officer, there's also wording in there where he's responsible to coordinate the activities of the assessors and the treasurer and tax collector and so forth. So that's probably more the financial officer aspect of it. Budget officer is preparing the budget.
Okay,
I mentioned in my introduction to the changes that I had taken out the chief administrator officer entirely when we had a discussion last night, because that phrase is then basically duplicated by the description of what that phrase would mean. But I was reading other sections of the bylaws, and it's in there in other places. And then I started thinking about all these other things that the town administrator is given a pseudo title to, which is not an official title anywhere. And I finally wondered whether or not it was worth a specific conversation about capitalization versus non-capitalization. Now, if he's called the chief administrative officer and there is no such title as that, then you can't read it as a title because it hasn't been conferred. You just have to read it as the function. So I myself stopped worrying about whether we had to go through the whole document and change all those capitalization letters. Plus, if now I'm not positive this is within her power, but if I were the town administrator, if I were the town moderator and we came to the end of the whole process, the town moderator could still say to whoever putting it together, and you're allowed to correct all scribe's errors. There are other scribe's errors in here. And it's easy to say that capitalization and non-capitalization is a scribe's error. And it could be done consistently throughout the whole thing, or it can be done inconsistently. It's just a scribe's error. If it does not refer to something that specifically already exists as a title, or we're not claiming in the document that a title is being given. So that was my kind of laissez-faire attitude about it.
Joe, the chief procurement officer is an actual position.
Yeah. So I don't know.
In bigger towns, it probably is a different person.
The what?
Yeah, in big towns it would be.
Yeah.
In Springfield, the Holyoke, you would have a chief procurement officer because the amount of spend that you would have. But in Granby, you would never, have that person as a full-time job.
Yeah, but I think but according to state law, you gotta designate someone.
Yeah.
Because that individual then turns around and has the ability to put out bids. They can't just be put out by the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense.
Okay,
Hey guys, I'm gonna run up against the clock, and I apologize, but I got an 8:15, so I got 3 minutes left if there's anything that we need to dive into.
Do you have any comments on any of the previous sections or later sections, the non-TA sections? I wrote up the changes that we're going to suggest on those. Did you get a chance to read it?
I read your changes this morning, John, and there's nothing that I had any strong feelings about.
Okay. All right, Rich, thanks for attending. Now listen, I'm going to schedule a meeting for tomorrow night for either 6:30.
Yeah, we're going to continue the meeting,
We're going to
right?
continue the meeting, yeah, for 6:37, because just to make sure that we see the same things in writing. So is 6:30 or 7 o'clock a better time for?
Okay.
I can't make it, John.
You can't make it, Rich?
6:30, whatever.
Yeah,
6:30.
I have reservations tomorrow night, so I won't be available.
Joe and Bob,
Yeah, I'm
6:30 or 7?
6:30 is fine with me.
6:30?
You need
6:30,
7, then 7 it is, but 6:30 is fine. I'll make it.
Okay. Okay. Rich, thanks for attending tonight. And
Take care, guys. Have a good evening.
You
thank
too, Rich.
Okay. Any other thing on anything, Bob? Any other changes to this administrator? I think we've got all the stuff. Administrator then, right?
on the administrator. No, I don't think I have anything else.
Okay.
No.
Let's move on. Let's move on to the other sections then.
Oh,
I
okay.
did by the
John, I know you want to move on.
John.
Number 17 on
Yeah, 17.
section. It says made available the audit management letter from any and all audit reports. Should we, here's where we could insert something that required that the management letter be posted to the public or something. Because he's mentioning made available, but doesn't say to whom. So that's the only reason I looked at that on that first
I'm
sentence.
going to change the last sentence to the town administrator will post the audit management letter on the town
Okay.
website.
Okay.
As a practical matter, the 60 pages of financial stuff is, assuming that there's nothing hanky-panky that's gone on, should be very similar to what is in there for the town accountant's report anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is the management letter that Rich Dombracki talked about, the usual 10 or 15 page thing, which is the audit management letter. And we just want to make sure that that gets distributed.
Yeah, that should be.
Yeah.
That's where you,
Now,
But it
That's-
just says made available. It doesn't say where, it doesn't say to.
no, but it does other places, says after it's been accepted by the Board of Selectmen, it'll be posted to the website.
Okay.
let me ask a question. I don't know what happens on this. The audit letter is given to the select board. There are suggestions for changes to be made. And I think what they may have been trying to get at here was that they should post what the results were of the suggestions that changes be made, or what results, if any changes were made, rather than the audit letter itself. And what I wonder is not whether or not you in fact want both of those things, both the audit letter and any changes that resulted from the audit letter.
Okay, that's fine. Just the first sentence is awkward.
Yeah,
Made available the audit management letter.
Okay.
Just felt awkward to me, that's all. But no big deal.
I took the word results to mean the negative aspects, but if results is determined that, yeah, everything has been cured and we aren't telling you what they were, that's not right. In other words,
Yeah.
you need to see
The letter.
where the failures were. Yeah, you need really to see the letter.
And if, it would be nice if, there was an additional document that said, we've taken this under consideration and the town is going to implement these changes to correct these deficiencies if there are any.
Well, that's what it's.
There's stuff in here where the town administrator is supposed to do that.
But
Okay,
anyway.
let me go back.
And it would probably also be nice to see the certification that the auditor gives from the financial report. In other words, he has an opinion, that
That's
Town's
different
records
from the
comply
management
with-
letter?
No,
yes,
I'm assuming it would be in the management letter, though.
we're probably talking two things. And I don't know, I can't remember what the certification is or the opinion that the auditor gives in the municipality, but
You mean like an audit level letter saying,
we've examined the books of blah, 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 and we
Right.
find everything to be done in accordance with
right,
FASB,
right,
rules and regulations, boom, 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 designed for municipal accounting and, that sort of stuff.
right.
To show that there's an opinion that that the books are correct
Right.
or not. If they,
To me,
They should be
that might be the first page of the financial review or the 60-page thing.
it's in the first couple of pages of it.
Right. Whether it's a separate document or whether it's part of that bigger document.
It's part of the bigger there's a report which gives an opinion as to the
Right.
stuff. With a private company, it's going to was done in, well, I can't remember the terms, but there's different levels of
Audit
opinion.
review and compilation
I don't
in
know.
the private sector.
Is that what it says?
No, I'm saying there are 3 different levels of audit in the private sector:
Oh,
compilation, review, and audit.
time out for a minute. Time out for a minute.
You don't need to go there.
Let me take you through the section line by line, because I think the questions that you're going to ask come up naturally as part of what we have here. Section
Yep.
17, or rather subsection 17 says, make available the audit management level from any and all audit reports. So that seems to me, first of all, we have a question about make available to whom. But the second question says the audit management letter from any and all audit reports. Are there more than one audit reports?
Rich sort of intonated that you've got like this long, you got all this data, 60, 70 pages. So technically that might be a report. I mean, maybe we should just reach out to Rich for, he's gone, but for clarification, but I would assume that it's just like everything else. So maybe there's a balance sheet and there's, so there's a variety of different kinds of reports.
So
that-
maybe an audit report and the management letter is broader, and then it covers maybe non-financial issues.
But is there more than one audit?
The management letter deals with whether or not the people know what they're doing and whether there's weaknesses in the accounting system, and
Right.
it's a
What's recommended
behavior of your financial operation, as distinct from the other one, which is how much money you have and where's it come from and where's it going.
But my first question is, how many of these are there in a year?
One.
Well, it says management, it says audit reports.
Maybe there's preliminary reports. I don't know. I guess you have to ask Chris.
Well, I'm trying to find, yeah, I changed it. I'm looking and I can't see the word reports, and that's because in the one that I did, I changed it.
Okay, let me, sorry, I had that, I meant to be working off of your copy, actually.
Okay, I'm looking at your, okay, I see. Make available the independent auditor's financial report and management letter from any and all audit examinations. The town administrator then shall report. Yep. Hey, Bob's change works, John. So I'm all for it, Bob. Thank you for pointing that out.
There's only, I mean, the management letter comes in with the report. It's all
Yes.
part of the same process, and there's only one done a year, done
Yes.
for your fiscal year.
So the only question is, do we designate who it's made available to, or do we say make available to the general public, to town residents, or? Because make available, hey, well, I made it available to, to John Libera, but nobody else, So does that language just mean it's sufficient for that? So.
Didn't Chris already say he was going to post it on a website?
Hey, it doesn't matter what's said verbally, Scott. We're working on the bylaws. The only thing that's going to matter in the end is
I
what's
thought
in.
we referenced it earlier when we were reading it.
Yes, he did say that. So
The difference that I made was I put in the auditor's report in addition to the management letter. The original one
yes,
just had.
no,
just the
I like
management
that.
letter.
My only question is, what does make available? I go back. That's what struck me to whom. I mean, because it could be, well, we're not going to share it with the town. We're only going to make it available to the select board. So you could interpret it because it's make available. Well, I made it available. That's all the bylaw says. I don't have to give it to Joe Fernia. I don't have to give it to Scott Wilson. I don't.
As a practical matter, they have to. They can just jerk you around as to how
Yeah.
long and how much they might charge you per copy to discourage you.
Or you could say, publish at town website.
Yeah, 60 pages is, or something up in
Right,
that
it's
neighborhood.
a hot link. You're just going in there and then you're scrolling through it, you know, but I do a lot of research, so I'm sort of used to doing that kind of thing, you know. So anyway,
All right. Subsection 17, then, I think that this make available the independent auditor's financial report and management letter from any and all audit examinations. I first thought we ought to say to whom, but I don't think it's needed. The town
Okay.
administrator shall report to the town all actions taken by responsible departments in response to the audit management letter recommendations. That's an important thing.
Yep.
This last sentence, the town administrator will post. Now, I think what we want to have posted is the audit management letter itself,
right.
plus the actions, plus the actions taken by responsible departments in response. We want those things
What the
posted.
actions taken by departments in response to,
I think we want those before. It's not just reporting to the town. It's putting them on the website, right?
well, I would like to see that because then it's there for everybody to access.
Yeah, that's my question. Is this what do we want that whole pile of stuff put on the website?
Well,
That's the
in the
whole
worst
file.
case, I
Excuse me?
would just like to say in the worst case, the audit management letter and the results of the actions by the different departments in response. To me, that would be the most important thing. Okay, the 60 or 70 pages, well, I mean, it might be nice for somebody to see it. I mean, if I'm an accountant in town, I might want to look at that. But outside of that, you know, or maybe I want to look at that because I'm smart enough to be able to to interpret it all and maybe come up with a different conclusion. I have no idea. But,
Have you ever looked at the accountant's report and the annual town report?
in the annual town report, yes, I've gone through it, but
Okay, all right.
but
I
I've
was just
also
wondering if you
glazed
had.
over it. I mean,
Great.
let's face it, you know, I'm cherry picking what I'm really looking at. So
I was gonna say,
so
great.
it's glazed over. Yeah, it would just be if somebody wanted to say, hey, I don't believe this, you know.
Okay, back to the sentence.
But anyway,
The town administrator will post the results of the audit. No, I'm sorry. The town administrator will post the audit management letter and
mhm.
what?
The results
Results of,
taken by departments in response to audit recommendations.
I think then, this sentence that says the town administrator shall report to the town all actions taken by responsible departments in response to the audit management letter recommendations, then should not be a sentence by itself. Instead, after the first thing, which is in the bold letter, the town administrator will post the audit management letter and all actions and results, either results of all actions or all actions taken by responsible departments in response to the audit management letter on the town website.
Yes,
Post
Yep.
on the town website. I'll say, we'll post on the town website, first, the audit management letter, and second, do I say the results of actions taken or the actions taken?
yeah, well, you could still use most of the second
results.
sentence.
I'm sorry, Bob,
I think you just need the actions.
just the actions?
What-
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, whether or not, how do you know what the results are? You may not know. I mean, you really don't know what the deficiencies are likely to be.
yeah, I always thought results meant the actions. That it was just kind of this imprecise language that they used to bylaw.
Well, actions lead to results. What's the outcome, I guess? If you want to really say results, if you take these actions that were recommended, do you get the desired outcome? But
Or what's the,
Not that it,
I mean,
not that
what's
it
the,
could be, but it could be something that was relatively Mickey Mouse. People, you do not have two people, or you have two people with control of the money or collusion, and all you do is you separate them. There really is no result
I think the
because you
better word is
just satisfy
response.
the problem.
Yeah, actions are fine.
I think response, what is the town's response to the recommendations? Because they might say, you know, we're not gonna do anything.
Yeah, that can be.
So that doesn't have to have
So,
an action.
so if you put down the word action and they don't take any action, it's left up to you to figure out whether that's a good or a bad thing.
I think,
That's
I
why
think
the
that,
town
I think
administrator has to
they should
report.
respond to what the letter says. The letter says this, what's their response?
The
It
second
might have an
sentence
action
says
or not.
John, the second sentence says that. So just based on your recommendation of what you just said, I agree with it. You know,
It doesn't say,
you
it
know,
doesn't
you're
say-
publishing the audit management letter and reporting to the town all actions taken by, you know, et cetera, and publish at the website.
we're missing response. We're missing response, but response doesn't necessarily tell you something, because your response could be, well, we took an action.
Yes.
That's the response, we took an action. What you want to know is, you want to know the actions that were taken, and you want to know the responses to items. Let me see if I can work both of those into the word.
To respond, including any actions taken.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because if the Board of Selectmen were to say, don't worry about it,
That's their response.
is that that's a response? Is it an action? I don't know. It's an inaction, I think.
Inaction, yeah.
It sounds like the old argument, is it a tactic or is it a strategy? I
Yeah.
don't know. Okay,
Is that it?
that's it.
That's it? Okay, now let's go to the other side.
Oh, all right.
Well, he's gonna get back to us tomorrow night anyway, and then, you know, at the meeting, we'll go over the final language, so. Okay, go ahead, John. Sorry.
All right, chapter 1, town meeting, town moderator elections and recall. Annual town meeting date. We're recommending that we only put in, the second Tuesday in May.
Right.
And that is, that's all the authority that's needed. The
Mhm.
town moderator can set any date for a continuation, following evening, 2 days later, 2 weeks later, anything's wanted. This doesn't accomplish anything, because if, for example, the budget isn't ready, then the budget isn't ready. We can have a meeting, the meeting can either be postponed and the second Tuesday, fourth Tuesday, or the meeting can be held long enough to adjourn it, because there is no warrant article ready to be discussed. You know, you can't force some of these things. I don't think you can force it. But the town needs a budget. If the budget isn't set sometime, then you can't set the tax rate. So you actually need a budget, but you don't need an incorrect budget. So I don't think it can be forced. And I think that all the steps necessary to have things done in a certain time period, if it's financially feasible and financially warranted, can be done. So anyway, that's our argument for only one day.
Okay,
Town meeting and special town meetings. Here are the thing that's marked subsection 1 is the only thing that's in there right now. And the issue that we should be thinking about is this. Notice in the second line, it says, if the petition is accepted, there shall be appended to the article the name of the first person signing the petition and the words "and others." This comes to the heart of what our intention is. If our intention is that we think that for the annual town meeting, a group of 10 people should have the authority to put an article onto the warrant, then accepted should be taken out and the word certified should be put in. is the warrant article has to be certified by the town clerk. And this would say that if it's in proper order, it's 10 people and it's in proper order, then it goes on the town warrant. And only 10 people take to do that. But this says if 10 people ask the select board to put it on, then select board agrees, then it'll go on. If select board doesn't agree, then it won't go on. Once upon a time, we were going to change this and just make it a much higher number of voters. You know, the 100 or 200 voters, which is in the other articles. And so then the question arises that for those statements that talk about the 100 voters or the 200 or 100 voters can get an article onto the next special town meeting, and 200 voters can force a special town meeting to be called. Is that only for special town meetings and not for the town meeting? If it's only for special town meetings, and I think that's the way it reads, then you have this question here that is there any way, should there be any way, where a group of voters can force an article onto the annual town meeting warrant?
I looked at the Secretary of State's website. Don't ask me how I got there because I was looking up something on this issue. These, not the bit about the elected officials, the other ones, the concept is in the state law. In other words, his website said 10 people, 100 people, 200 people, call a special meeting, go to the next meeting. But and the way it was worded, and some of the stuff that they have is their opinion, not necessarily a full legal opinion. But the way it was worded was that 10 people can get something on the annual town meeting warrant, which is contrary to the way ours is interpreted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ours is interpreted that subject to whether they want to put it on or not.
Yeah, and if that's the case, 10 people can get around and sit with 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, and they don't need to sign their name and have a petition. They can just convince the selectmen, because that's all they have to do. My thought, I had said before, in thinking about larger numbers to eliminate Mickey Mouse warrant articles on a petition, I think I come to the conclusion I put in my email there. I think the right of the public to get something on the town meeting warrant is more important than whether or not they will abuse it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that suggests that what we do is move to change this to certified. And
Yeah.
then the town can have the debate based upon the difference of what those things might mean.
Yeah.
We can, what the Secretary of State says and so on. Okay.
And it doesn't really come up very often.
No.
So does certified also mean accepted? Is there a difference?
Yeah,
Do you say accepted and certified?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same.
Certified means it is, and
Means
the
the
way it's
same
worded.
thing, right? If you accept it, you're going to certify it, right?
No, certification is by the Board of Registrars that the people are voters in the town of Granby.
Oh. So all they have to do is certify the petition to get the warrant article on the annual town.
What you
Yeah,
certify,
that's-
what you certify is the signatures. I
Yes.
think that's certified,
Yes.
right?
So what we're saying is we're taking away the power.
Hold on just a minute, Joe, because this I think is exactly what you were complaining about once before. Certified means these are legitimate signatures and it's the right number and so on.
Right.
The warrant itself could be faulty, which was the argument was made about what the warrant article that you tried to get onto a one-town meeting. Their argument was that it was these are voters, no doubt about it, but the form of the warrant article was faulty, so they couldn't put it on. So this doesn't say anything all about that. That still has to follow all the rules.
So it could be certified and faulty.
Yes.
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 In that case, it's not accepted by the town moderator.
Well,
or ruled out of order by the town council, something like that. Yeah.
Right, but that's legitimate reason for rejecting it.
Well, I get that, but right now, the way everything is written, it's at the, whatever reason, they can reject it automatically. Hey, we don't like it, we don't want it, we don't, there's no reason. They can just accept it or reject it,
Well,
regardless of whether it's been certified.
the written bylaws, or in these new bylaws for getting things on special town meetings, is very clear. They can't.
Mm-hmm.
You can only reject things if it's, and the town administrator, one reason the town administrator wants to see all these things a week beforehand is that it takes some time to look at them and check with town council if she thinks it's necessary as to whether or not they're in a proper form. And she's not going to allow things that aren't in the proper form.
Yeah.
And anybody, the select board should do that. So let's should we change the word accepted to certified? Do we want 10 people to be able to do this?
Yes, because you'd have to have something with 10 people, because I'm pretty sure that's what the state law says.
Okay,
No, certified is okay. I'm just saying their intent, as I read the intent of the drafters of this, is to vest a decision to allow it on the annual town meeting or not allow it on the town meeting. Okay?
Yes, but that's the way it's been right along.
No,
That's
and I
not-
get that. And what I'm trying to say is certified has nothing to do with whether they'll accept it. You
Right, but
have to have it certified in order to accept it, but they could make a decision not to accept it, not just because of something faulty, but because, hey, if they get that, you can make other independent decisions, I don't really want that because that's an potential expenditure of $10,000, and I don't want to muddy up the budget, so I'm just going to not accept it. You don't have to say I didn't accept it for faulty. Normally that's what they'll try to say, but and then they'll never tell you what language was at fault. That was my example. Hey, Joe, it's faulty. And I said, well, what's the problem? Well, you have to go figure it out. So that's like, okay, you can call it faulty. I don't know if it's faulty or not. Maybe it isn't faulty, but it's in your purvey to make that decision. That's the way I sort of read the situation right now. So anyway.
okay, we're going to change the word. Now then the one that we added is that we also thought from previous conversations that elected officials or the other group of people, they shouldn't need 10 people. They're elected officials are the
Yes.
forgotten group of people through all this stuff at town meetings. But
Oh, yeah.
we have independently elected people performing real
We have no power. Right. No, I agree.
They should be able to just themselves insert something. Same thing, same power that the select board has. Now, question I had after writing it up is this: we have 3 members of the Board of Assessors. So we have a Board of Assessors, and there are 3 members of the Board of Assessors. They are
Mhm.
each elected officials.
Yes.
Should any one of them have the authority to put a warrant article in for the town meeting, or does it require a majority vote of the board that they're on?
Oh. So maybe any,
Elected board,
Well, did the board approve it, or are they do it individually?
That's my question. They're an elected
it,
official.
it should be the board approving it.
I
yeah,
agree.
well, right now, John, I would interpret it your way. Any individual, regardless of whether this is the majority of the board that agrees with it or not, would be able to submit it if it relates to the obligations, duties, or operations. Whereas any elected board of the town.
That's the way I wrote it.
Then you have to have a collective, right?
That's the way I wrote, but I'm not claiming that that was my intent. What I'm
Right.
bringing up to you is the question. The question that we have to answer is not about it might be about elected officials, but it might be about elected boards or elected officials who are not members of a board.
are they speaking as the board or as they speaking as a person?
No, they have to,
Just-
well, they have to bring it forward as the board. But again, if you leave elected official and you got 5 board members, like on my board, you know, somebody who we all disagree with, we outvoted them 4-1, technically would be able to still bring an article.
Go get the 10 votes and do it individually then, not as a member of the committee.
Yeah, but the concept that I've had with it is it's gotta be the board because it's the operation of the department. One
Yes.
person can't operate the department. So if one person brought something forward and the other 2 don't like it, the department doesn't want it.
I agree.
So you gotta have any elected board.
Of the town may insert, right. Okay,
Okay, now what language do we put in here for elected officials who are not on a board? We got the treasurer, we got the tax collector, we got the clerk.
Oh, all right, that's right.
And we need something for all those people. So it's any elected board of the town or any elected official who is not a member of the board. Any elected official of the town who is not a member of the board.
right. So insert,
Non-board,
I agree.
non-board elected official? That sounds kind
No,
of cumbersome.
Yeah, you had the language, John.
Any elected board of the town or any elected official who is not a member of a board.
Member of a board,
I mean, who is not a member of an elected board.
right. Okay,
Any elected board of the town or any elected official who is not a member of an elected board may insert. Now, the only loophole here is that if by chance a person is an elected official, let's think of, say, the town treasurer, elected, runs his or her own department, but is also a member of the Board of Appeals, or rather of the planning board.
mm-hmm,
All right, and decides that wants to bring up an article about the planning board, and it's within his duties or obligations. But in fact, the rest of the planning board has voted against him on this.
okay.
He could still do it because he's an elected official who is not a member of a board.
I don't think so.
No,
Because
because
it's not
you
his-
narrowed it. Right,
It's gotta be pertinent to the department. And the minute that individual makes it part of a planning board issue, he's now considered to be a member of the elected board.
Okay? We agree that's interpretation.
yes.
Instead of the elected officials or elected board's office. Boards, the elected official's office or the elected board's office. Okay, I'll add those things. All right, that is,
Awful wordy for a very simple concept.
yeah. Well, it's as let's say it is at least as simple as the structure of the town.
Right.
All right.
Complexity.
Town administrator. Okay, let us do. So we've done chapter 1. We've done chapter 3.
Mhm.
We've got chapter 2 and 9, I think, right? Let me find the
Yeah.
page.
Page 4. Oh, they're all 4. Maybe not. Okay. I guess it's page 2, John. Above it.
All right, let's do the budget is a simple one. Let's do the budget.
Isn't chapter 2 at the top of the same page?
This is chapter 4 budget.
Okay.
Section 2 budget schedule.
Yep.
The town administrator shall prepare and present a budget calendar on or before November 1st to all the affected departments and committees. The overall schedule in the budget calendar shall allow for the finalization of the budget in time to include appropriation detail in the town meeting warrant and the town meeting booklet. And then delete the rest of that.
Yep.
The rest of it is this schedule example. And we've been through, it's faulty as it's in there. It's not a good example. It just doesn't work and it doesn't belong. It's not needed there. The only thing that's needed is for it to be done every year. And you know pretty certain that once a town administrator develops the first one, that's going to be used every year with just a change of dates occasionally because of the calendar. And
Yep.
so he can use, he can use that draft schedule for what it's worth or any other one. But it's got, just so the principle is that the budget calendar should be done so everybody knows what's going on with it. Okay, that's chapter 4 on the budget.
Mhm.
Now, we got chapter 2 on the select board. And this is on Bob's page 4 and my page 4.
Yes.
And this is where we basically, in a roundabout fashion, had a lot of discussion about it already because it affects the chapter 3 on the town administrator. Now, what I did, and this was really to solve the problem of how do we let the town administrator choose the people who's going to report to him, with the exception of some of the pieces which would seem so key for the town as a whole that it really calls out for the select board to be the ultimate authority for what's going on. So I put in a section 10 on police chief and fire chief, and put in a section 11 on town accountant and town auditor. I think that section 10 is no longer needed, certainly. Section 10, we've already done that. They are department heads, and we've covered that department heads need to be approved and appointed by the select board. So is that correct? Everybody's understanding of conversations we had earlier this evening?
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Even if it's well, as devil's advocate, even if it's redundant,
It's not redundant. It's different. It's different.
Yeah.
So I would say get out of that. And as Bob keeps mentioning that if you don't say anything at all, then it's the select board's responsibility to appoint fire chiefs and police chiefs.
Okay.
Okay, the next easiest one to do is up in section 9, subparagraphs 1 and 2. Why don't we go over those? I put in appoint pursuant, and we have the correct Mass General chapter law. Bob had looked those up, and I looked them up, and this is the correct one to appoint a town administrator. The change I made is this. In the law, in the Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 23A, it actually says that the select board can appoint a town administrator for a term of 1 or 3 years. It doesn't say 2, doesn't say 2.5, doesn't say 6 months. It says 1 or 3 years. And I don't know if there's an interpretation that that means anything up to 3 years, but it's certainly not what it says in MGL. So I changed the wording of up to 3 years that was in the written by the current projected bylaw, promoted
Or
bylaw.
1 or, yeah, to the state law,
It's
1
up
or
to
3.
And so I changed that to 1 or 3 years. I want everybody to be aware of that. So if you have any comments on that, I gotta get them in soon.
Okay, my comment is, as chairman of the Housing Authority, and we hire the executive director for DHCD, the state agency, we are allowed to enter into contracts of 1 or 3 years.
Okay,
Each time we go for the contract, it's either a 1-year contract or a 3-year contract.
Okay.
And, you know, so I'm assuming that's the logic, so, okay.
and it's right there. I mean, I was very surprised, but it's right there in the authority, appointing authority law.
Yeah.
And then the next one is they can enter into a contract, and that's under a different section of Chapter 41. So the town administrator shall perform the duties assigned by the select board and shall not perform any function that has not been approved by the town administrator by the select board or these bylaws. That's pretty much what was said, if not exactly. Let me see.
So are we eliminating, John, both sections 10 and 11 then?
Not yet. We're going to talk about 11.
Okay,
All right. So
so we
that's
are eliminating 10, right?
all right. That's the section 1, and section 1 is basically what it says in the current proposed bylaw change with some wording cleaned up. And
Okay.
we've added a new section, section 2. And this
Right.
we discussed the other night. Any vacancy in the office of town administrator shall be filled as soon as possible by the select board. If any vacancy is expected to exceed 14 calendar days, or if the town administrator is unable to perform the duties of that office for a period expected to exceed 14 calendar days, the select board shall appoint a suitable person as acting town administrator to perform the duties of the office. I did talk to Kathy last night, who's not an acting town administrator, but is the assistant town administrator. I said, what happens now when Chris is out? And decisions have to be made on some things. Kathy says on all the day-to-day decisions, she just asks the select board if what she wants to do is okay, and they say yes or no. And basically, it's always yes. She pretty much knows what she's doing. So it's taken care of now by having the person who's second in command required to have each decision checked by the select board. And I think that if we have a qualified person, then they don't really need the select board's approval. But we do have to have the position filled. And as I said, the things we're not really worried about, and I don't think anybody's worried about, is that, for example, if the town administrator is out for medical reasons and it's going to be a month, you really want somebody who can do all the day-to-day stuff. And you probably, if your assistant town administrator you don't feel is quite ready to be qualified as a town administrator, then you can go and you can hire somebody. to come in and do the position for you. So, and that was our thinking last night, and that's what I think I've incorporated into the language. Any comments?
No, I'm all for leaving it in.
Okay, as it reads?
Yeah, good.
Okay. Then section 11, authority to appoint town accountant and town auditor. Let's see, what Bob has done, let me find that section. Bob has changed that to the select board shall appoint an independent auditor. The select board may consider any recommendations from the town administrator as to the engagement of the independent auditor. And given all our conversations tonight, I myself like that section 11, which would become a new section 10. I think that it accomplishes kind of the most important thing, that whatever else happens, the auditor is independent of virtually everybody else. And
Actually,
excuse me?
it may be necessary to hire an independent auditor. I think if you receive federal grants, you have to have an independent audit done, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. So leaving it in is the safe thing, but it may turn out to be redundant.
Now, the other thing that I had worried about before, as I mentioned, I saw in Mass General Law that for a town, if the town appoints an accountant, they can also appoint that accountant as their auditor.
Internal.
Internal auditor doesn't.
Yes, internal.
Huh?
I don't think that's the year-end outside CPA third-party review.
Yeah, I think in the Mass General Law, I think it is.
Why bother to use an internal person to have a review of your department? That doesn't make sense.
I'll tell you, I looked up independent auditors and came up with some city, I can't remember which one it was, and it was the office of the auditor. John Tracy was his name, I remember that.
The city?
But I looked at the audit report and it came in from Mellinson Heath, or whatever their name is.
Yeah.
So that even though they had an internal auditor, they still had an external auditor or an independent auditor, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, well, that would always be the intelligent thing to do. We got to protect against everything here. In a city is not allowed to do this. I don't know whether a city's internal auditor may not be allowed to be the external auditor. But for some reason or other, it says in the Mass General Law that for a town, the accountant can serve as the auditor. And I don't know what other kind of qualifications go along with that. Tell you what, let me leave in this for what I prepared for tomorrow. Let me leave in this wording just as it is. I'll go back and look up again if I can find that. If I can find that login. I don't think I wrote down what it was.
Yeah, I don't know if it matters.
We want the independent auditor no matter what.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Maybe independent. Independent is probably the key thing here.
Okay, and there's just a typo. You got two I's before the T in auditor.
Do? Oh, well, that's only one typo you found on me.
I-I-T-O-R. Well, I'm not looking for typos right now. But
I corrected a couple of them.
Is that a scriber's error?
Yeah.
We're all scribes now. That's what I want, you know.
This is the,
I feel so academic.
Where's the second eye? I don't see any second eye.
AUDIITOR.
Is this a scriber's variance?
This is on your version,
Oh, all right, in the heading,
in the heading,
In the
yeah.
heading. That's what I was saying.
I
Okay.
was looking down, it's auditors down there twice, so obviously it was a typo, I know how to spell.
Our auditor is so independent, he doesn't even bother to follow spelling rules.
Yeah, you didn't even use
He
spell.
doesn't look at the green on the Word document to see that he got a misspelling. Or red, I guess that would be, not green, that's red.
All right. I think that is it.
Yep.
I think that is it.
Well, I hope so. I'm ready to bail.
I'll make a motion, we recess until tomorrow night at 6:30.
Do I have a
I
second?
second the motion.
I